Hello and welcome. Everything is very much in winter mode. Look at the beautiful hollies behind me, just covered in snow and berries. Absolutely gorgeous for the holidays. But I wanted to take the time to make some videos that goes over how things did throughout the year. What was blooming when, what did beautifully throughout the seasons, and what challenges I had in my gardening. And I also wanted to go through some final thoughts and then plans for next year. So this will be a 3-part video, and I hope you enjoy. So my first recordings of my garden this year was in May. And this is when the garden was really putting on quite a bit of growth and starting to show up. But in June is where I had the most color and just so vibrant. The St. John's wort was this electric yellow. And then my rose campion was also just this stunning, vibrant magenta color. And the dianthus was just exploding with little pink flowers. It's the most it put on since it was planted last year. The Marcus sage here is beautiful, just again a vibrant purple color. And then the catmint was so big this year, beautiful. Towards the end of June, the daisies were all in bloom, beautiful show, and the yarrow was starting to bud out and bloom. So here in July, while some things were starting to slow down, others were emerging. And here is the Hydrangea cherry brandy, just absolutely popping and looking beautiful. And also the Echinacea powwow was sending out these beautiful vibrant flowers. And then lastly, the yarrow. This was, I think, the showstopper. Did really well in this season and just gorgeous, gorgeous color. Beautiful. And then I also added a rock garden with some sempervivum, so hens and chicks, and yeah, that was added this month. And then lastly, I had transplanted some calendula, and then the hyssop also was really starting to emerge and put out some beautiful blooms. So for the month of August, the showstoppers here were the lily turf, who put out these beautiful purple flowers. This is the first year I saw it because bunnies ate them last year. And then the one big grass that I have was absolutely stunning and putting out seed heads and looking beautiful. So I also had added some zinnias in this flower bed so that I can gain some color to take me into the fall season. And unfortunately, my coreopsis didn't do so well. It budded out. It gave me 1 or 2 flowers, but I think it kept getting eaten by bunnies. The lavender, though, did very well, including the transplants. And now we're into September, where the only things that really were blooming and showing up were the zinnias, which actually put on some really nice color into this garden bed. And then of course the grass was looking spectacular for this season. I did cut back the yarrow, and that had started to rebloom. But that's all that really showed up. The hyssop was towards the very end. And now in October, everything's looking very tired, except for the zinnias that are blooming their heads off and looking beautiful, adding some color, as well as the grass, which looked gorgeous for the fall season. But that takes us into end of October, which I got a frost. And this put a layer of frost on pretty much every single plant, and all the foliage started to die later that day, and that caused me to have to cut everything back. So now let's start with the bed where I had the hydrangeas, and these were looking beautiful in June, and towards the end they just were popping with blue color, absolutely stunning. I also had heucheras here that started blooming as well in the June month. And then in July, everything was looking relatively the same. The hydrangeas, though, started losing some of the color, and it wasn't looking quite as vibrant, but it was starting to turn. The heucheras still did very, very well. They were long-lived. And then my other hydrangea really started to put on some flowers as well and some color. This was the first year it bloomed, so I was super excited about that with this shrub. And then we go into August, and the New Guinea impatiens did beautiful. They were just stunning with color, and then the hydrangeas were starting to turn even more into a pinkish color, which looked so beautiful, just gorgeous. The hydrangea didn't have the flowers as much because it did get burnt out. This bed gets too much sun, so it was a little crispy by this time, unfortunately, and I lost a lot of that color. And then here in September, everything was still looking great. Everything for the hydrangeas, they were starting to turn more and more maroon pinkish color, but I was having some issues with distortion of the leaves. But everything else seemed to still hold up fairly well. And then I had also planted some daisies, and I had transplanted that from the corner bed, and they did really well. They really took in, and I think they're going to do even better in this bed with a little less sun. Based on the tag, that's where they belong. So now in October, everything was looking beautiful, a lot less pressure from all the insect problems I was having. And yeah, everything looked quite beautiful just as is until the final frost, where it just killed off all the foliage. So now I want to move on to the bed where I had the generator, and here I had the Millennium Alliums, and in June they were budding out, and slowly the entire month they just filled in with more and more buds. I had also planted a lot of the lily bulbs and the gladiolus bulbs that I purchased at Walmart, so those all were putting out a lot of leaves. And I had this other hydrangea, which also in June was starting to put on some buds, and it was the first year since the transplant into this bed, so that was wonderful to see. Then in late June, the lilies started to bloom, and those were looking quite beautiful. But then in July, we had a lot more budding, and a little bit of bloom started to show up with the Millennium Alliums, and those were looking quite beautiful. And what showed up as well was my salmon star lily, which is my absolute favorite. It was very short, but still absolutely gorgeous. And then my hydrangea was in full bloom as well, with this vibrant pink color, just absolutely beautiful. So I had not seen it before. I didn't know what kind of flower color it would put out, so that is quite beautiful. I was really loving that flower. And then the lily centerfolds had finished, but the salmon stars were showing some buds in this bed in July, as well as the gladiolas started to bloom on this side of the bed, and I was getting some beautiful color with these throughout the month of July, with one coming out at a couple coming out at a time, and then throughout the month I was able to have some color in the bed. Then in August, the Millennium Alliums were in full bloom and were the star of the show and just a pollinator magnet. Bees all over these flowers, and in some cases, the bee even falling asleep in the evening. Also, the hollies started putting out some red berries during August, which was kind of surprising to me. But then in September, the Millennium Alliums had really finished up, and I did spray paint them to give them a little bit of color. I want to try a different color next year, but yeah, and then the berries were still looking beautiful on the holly. So that concludes part 1, and in part 2 I will cover the remaining flower beds. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in part 2. Thanks. Bye.